was forced to my knees, gun to my head, one shot, and everything went out, all because of my father's old military jacket. They thought I was going to die. They thought I was nothing. But in that moment, they activated something they didn't realize. And now, I'm going after them. Subscribe, comment where you're watching from. The day started the same way every other day had for the last few years. Quiet. Too quiet. I woke up before the sun even considered stretching across the Chicago skyline. My room, a sparse one-bedroom apartment on the city's south side, was soaked in the kind of silence that always comes before something breaks. I lay still in the dark, listening to the sound of the radiator ticking and the distant echo of a train groaning somewhere far off. But my eyes weren't on the ceiling or the wall. They were locked on the object draped across the chair in the corner, my father's military jacket. It wasn't just fabric and thread, it was a map of everything he was worn. Elbows, sun-bleached patches, and frayed cuffs that had weathered sandstorms in the Middle East and the frozen silence of Eastern Europe. It still carried his scent, faintly buried beneath layers of time, a mix of engine oil, cold steel, and cheap tobacco. Every morning, I debated whether to wear it, and every morning I gave in. It wasn't about nostalgia. It was armor, a way to hold myself together when the rest of the world was determined to pick me apart. That morning, I slipped it on with more care than usual. The weight of it always grounded me, reminded me that I came from someone who stood for something. I didn't have medals or stories like he did, just the jacket and a gnawing sense that I wasn't living up to the name stitched over the heart, Keller. The hallway outside my apartment was dim. A few flickering ceiling lights buzzed overhead. The elevator, as usual, was broken, so I took the stairs, every step echoing off the concrete like a countdown. Outside, the wind bit at my face. Early spring in Chicago always felt like a false promise. Sunlight with teeth. I tightened the jacket, shoved my hands deep into its pockets, and began the walk to the hospital. I worked the night shifts, the ones no one else wanted. People assumed it was because I was quiet, because I didn't push back. Maybe that was true once, but over time, I found value in silence. It allowed me to observe, to see the rot growing in places people didn't expect. I started filing complaints 6 months ago. Nothing dramatic. Just things that didn't sit right, shortages that made no sense, supplies that vanished, numbers that didn't add up. No one wanted to hear it, especially not from the quiet one. As I passed the corner diner, I waved at old Mrs. Davies through the window. She was always there by 5, coffee in one hand, newspaper in the other. She raised her cup when she saw me and mouthed, "Be safe." I gave her a tired nod. She always said that, and I always tried to believe it mattered. Crossing the intersection near the convenience store, I noticed a police cruiser parked off to the side. The windows were tinted, but I could feel eyes watching me. I kept my pace steady. The weight of the jacket on my shoulders felt heavier than usual. I was about 10 feet past the cruiser when I heard the engine start and the gravel crunch beneath the tires. The cruiser rolled forward slowly, then accelerated just enough to match my pace. I didn't look. I didn't stop. I just walked. The window rolled down with a mechanical hum. A voice too casual and too loud for this early in the morning rang out. "Well, would you look at that?" I turned my head, just slightly. Sheriff Malcolm Shaw leaned out the driver's window, chewing on something with lazy arrogance. His eyes flicked to the jacket. "You think that thing means something, son?" I kept walking. My grip on the bag tightened, my heart already thudding against my ribs. "Hey, I'm talking to you," he said, opening the door and stepping out. His boots hit the pavement with purpose. I stopped. He adjusted his belt, hand brushing his holster in that not quite subtle way men like him did when they wanted to remind you who held the power. "We got a call," he said, eyes scanning the sidewalk. "Someone matching your description, white male, brown hair, wearing military gear, seen acting suspiciously around public buildings. Gonna need you to kneel, son." "On what grounds?" I asked. My voice was calm, but only barely. He smiled, slow and cold. "Don't make this harder than it has to be." Pedestrians slowed. Phones appeared. Whispers floated in the air. My breath came shallow. My knees ached just thinking about the concrete. I looked at the people around me, some curious, some afraid, none willing to step forward. I thought about my father, about the way he held himself even in pictures, back straight, eyes steady. I wanted to be like that, but I knelt. The heat of the concrete seeped through my jeans. I stared at the ground as he stepped closer, his boots appearing in my peripheral vision. "Your daddy's jacket doesn't mean anything here," he muttered, almost like he was enjoying it. I didn't answer. He stepped around me. I heard the click of a safety being released. My chest constricted. The jacket suddenly felt like a shroud. A crack tore through the air. It felt like someone had shoved a white-hot iron through my side. My vision tilted, the world twisted. I hit the pavement hard. My lungs forgot how to breathe. A scream got stuck somewhere between my chest and my throat. "Shots fired!" someone shouted. "Call 911. I heard sirens before I saw them. Everything blurred. Faces, flashing lights, the color red blooming across my shirt, my hands, the pavement. People screamed. A child cried. I tasted metal, my own blood. I couldn't move. A voice came through the noise, one I'd never heard but somehow recognized, like a memory that never belonged to me. It whispered against my ear, calm and efficient. "Subject confirmed. Protocol Phoenix activated. Extraction en route." I tried to speak. Failed. The paramedics arrived like a storm. Hands pressed against the wound. The jacket was peeled away, sticky and soaked. A needle pricked my arm. Someone shouted about blood pressure dropping. I saw my brother standing outside the crowd. Detective Conrad Keller. He wasn't rushing toward me. He wasn't shouting in panic. He was watching. Cold, detached. The way someone watches a problem solve itself. I passed out before they loaded me into the ambulance. When I woke, it wasn't the ceiling that greeted me, but the sterile buzz of fluorescent lights and the slow beep of a heart monitor. The hospital. My hospital. I recognized the voices, the tile pattern, even the nurse who briefly looked up, recognized me and looked away. I was supposed to feel safe here. I didn't. My side felt like it had been torn open and sewn back together with fire. I turned my head. The jacket was on the chair beside me, crumpled and bloodied. I couldn't look at it too long. It felt like failure. The room was quiet except for the machines. Then a vibration stirred under my hip. A phone. The one I had tucked inside the lining of the jacket weeks ago, just in case. Just in case turned out to be today. I reached for it slowly, biting back a groan. The screen lit up. No number, just one message. "You have been activated." And that was when I knew. They thought I'd die quietly in the street. They had no idea who they had just shot. They had no idea what my father left behind. They had no idea that the war was just beginning. The beeping of the monitors was too steady, too calm, too detached from the searing heat that pulsed through my side like a second heartbeat. It took effort just to breathe. The ceiling above me was sterile white, unblinking, like it was waiting to see if I would crack under the weight of silence. My hands ached. My mouth tasted like copper and gauze. My body, stitched together and half doped on painkillers, felt like a vessel I no longer fully inhabited. I was alive, that was the problem. The phone still buzzed beneath my thigh, muffled under the paper-thin mattress. I shifted carefully, my fingers moving with the kind of deliberation that only pain can teach. The message was still there, unblinking. "You have been activated." Not a name. Not a signature. But I knew what it meant. My father's warnings weren't drunk ramblings or paranoid theories. They were instructions, contingencies, fail-safes built into memories I hadn't known to take seriously. As a child, I used to think he told me bedtime stories laced with code words just to entertain me. Words like Phoenix, red light, and shadow hook meant nothing to a 10-year-old. But they'd stuck, tucked deep in some forgotten drawer in my head, until now. A few hours passed. Maybe more. It was hard to tell. Nurses drifted in and out. Their shoes squeaked softly against the tile, and they never met my eyes. One of them adjusted my IV, another scribbled on a clipboard, and left without a word. The world had grown hushed around me, like everyone had received the same memo: don't engage. Treat, move on, keep your distance. I wasn't a patient. I was a problem. Then the door creaked open again. He walked in like he owned the room, like he had every right to be there, every right to look down on me and act like we were brothers and not adversaries. Conrad? His tie was loosened. His badge still hung neatly from his chest. There wasn't a hair out of place, not a drop of visible guilt on his face. But his eyes, they flicked to the monitors before meeting mine, calculating. "You're lucky to be alive," he said softly, dragging a chair closer to the bed. "Most guys don't walk away from a shot like that." I didn't answer. I didn't need to. He sighed and opened the folder he'd been holding. Inside were papers, not medical, not official in any meaningful way, just smooth, typed language designed to close doors. Non-disclosure, liability release, statements acknowledging that I had behaved erratically, that the officer fired in fear, that I had posed a threat. My signature was the only thing missing. "You don't have to make this worse, Ree," he said, sliding the folder onto my lap. "Sign this. Let us take care of it. You can go home. We can keep this quiet." I stared at the page. His voice was practiced even, but I knew the tone beneath it. I'd heard it all my life. The tone that said, "Do as I say, or suffer the consequences." "You were there," I rasped. My voice sounded foreign, like it belonged to someone else. "You watched." "I was there," he agreed, and for a moment something flickered behind his eyes. "But this isn't about us. You stumbled into something. You don't understand what you're dealing with." He leaned forward. "Please, don't make yourself the target." I looked at him, at the man I had once admired, the brother who used to carry me on his back, who taught me how to throw a football, who knew every shortcut through our old neighborhood. That version of him had died a long time ago. The man sitting in front of me was a stranger who wore my last name like a shield. I didn't say another word. He took my silence for consideration, nodded tightly, and stood. "I'll give you some time," he said. "Think about it." When the door closed behind him, I waited, listened, counted the seconds. The hallway hushed again. No more footsteps, no voices, just the constant, mechanical rhythm of my heartbeat on the monitor. And then night fell. It came slowly, like it always did in hospitals, filtered through layers of artificial light until you couldn't tell dusk from midnight. A nurse entered. She was small, efficient, her hair tucked tightly beneath her cap. She didn't make eye contact. She didn't say a word. She moved quickly, adjusting the IV with practiced ease. Too quickly. Her hand dipped into her pocket, pulling out a syringe. No label, no explanation, just a silent movement toward the IV line. I forced my hand to move. My fingers closed around her wrist before the needle touched plastic. She froze. Her eyes met mine. Something shifted in her face. Cold calculation replaced feigned professionalism. I caught a glimpse of her lanyard, a small camera clipped to it. And then I saw the tattoo on the inside of her wrist. A coiled snake wrapped around a cross. I knew that symbol. It was the mark of Clay Shaw's old crew, the same symbol painted on the back walls of warehouses, etched into the bottom of drug crates, whispered about in files that vanished from evidence rooms. She tried to yank free. I held tight. "You picked the wrong room," I hissed through gritted teeth. The syringe dropped onto the bed. I slammed the call button with my free hand. The alarms shrieked. She bolted. The door flew open seconds later, two security guards nearly colliding with each other as they rushed in. One of them shouted, the other gave chase. I slumped back into the pillow, breath shallow, pain hot and blooming again. Blood trickled from where I'd torn the IV out. The machines screamed in protest. Nurses flooded the room like bees disturbed from the hive. Hands pressed. Voices demanded answers, but all I could think about was the taste of adrenaline in my mouth and the face of the woman who had come to finish the job. I couldn't stay. When the room cleared, when they'd reattached the IV and given me a sedative I refused to swallow, I lay still and stared at the ceiling. The phone buzzed again. Another message. Eyes on you. Move tonight. Code Phoenix. I waited for the shift change. At 3:17 a.m., I peeled the wires from my chest. Every movement tore at the wound in my side. I gritted my teeth, biting down on the pain. The soft beeping of the monitors flatlined into silence. I pulled on the jacket. The blood had dried in patches. It stuck to my shirt, to my skin. But I didn't care. I opened the drawer beside my bed. Inside, wrapped in a towel, was the one thing I'd managed to smuggle in unnoticed. The burner phone, tucked into the inner pocket of my duffel bag before the ambulance ride. I pressed a number I didn't remember memorizing, but my fingers knew it anyway. It rang twice. A voice answered. Low, gravelly, familiar. It's me, I whispered. Phoenix is burning. There was a pause, then a breath. Where are you? Hospital, South Wing, room 36. Can you walk? Barely. 10 minutes, exit through laundry. The line went dead. I pushed myself upright. My legs trembled. The world spun. I steadied myself on the IV pole, used it as a crutch, and limped toward the bathroom. There, hidden behind a loose panel in the wall, was a uniform, scrubs and a cap. Delivered earlier by a janitor with too much purpose in his eyes to be real staff. 10 minutes later, I was in the laundry corridor, the scent of bleach and detergent thick in the air. Machines rumbled around me. Carts of linens moved past like ghosts. She was waiting. Not the nurse from earlier. Someone else. Older. African-American. Kind eyes. Hard jaw. I recognized her immediately. Eleanor, my father's friend from the VA hospital. She'd held my hand during his funeral. She didn't speak. She just nodded and handed me a key. Old Safe House, West 43rd, apartment 2B. Then she turned and disappeared through the maze of machines. I walked into the night, wrapped in my father's jacket, broken but alive. I didn't look back. The building on West 43rd stood like a forgotten tooth in a row of crumbling smiles, wedged between a shuttered laundromat and a liquor store with flickering neon letters that spelled out BR. It took me 3 tries to get the key into the rusted lock, my fingers stiff and clumsy from exhaustion and pain. When the door finally swung open, I stood for a long moment on the threshold, breathing in the scent of dust and disuse. The apartment hadn't been touched in years. Yellowed curtains filtered the streetlight into slats across the peeling linoleum, and the air was stale with memories that didn't belong to me. I closed the door behind me, locked it, slid the bolt home, and double-checked the chain. Only then did I allow myself to breathe fully, to sink down onto the couch with a groan and ease the jacket from my shoulders. The dried blood cracked along the fabric like old paint. My side ached with every movement, but I didn't dare take the painkillers Eleanor had slipped into my pocket. I needed to stay sharp. There would be time to hurt later. The coffee table in front of me wobbled on one leg, and beneath it sat a fireproof box. Just like my father said there would be. It was scuffed and dented, the kind of thing that could survive a fire, a flood, or a war. I pulled it out and set it on the couch beside me, then used the small silver key from my jacket's inside pocket to open it. The lock clicked softly. Inside, everything was wrapped in oilcloth, layered with care. I unwrapped the first bundle and found a collection of photographs, folded letters, and a small USB flash drive tucked into the binding of a leather notebook. My father's handwriting marked each envelope, initials, dates, locations. Some were old military designations, others were names I didn't recognize. I touched the ink gently, feeling the weight of the man behind the script. I plugged the flash drive into the battered laptop Eleanor had left for me in the kitchen drawer. It took a minute for the screen to flicker on, the fan wheezing like an asthmatic dog. Password prompt appeared, and I didn't hesitate. 6 letters and 4 numbers. The name of our dog growing up and my birth year. The screen blinked once, then opened into a list of encrypted folders. The first one I opened was labeled KK Op/Intel 417. I didn't know what I expected, maybe grainy surveillance footage or mission debriefs, but what I saw instead were ledgers, transactions, emails, internal memos, payments made to private contractors, weapons shipments redirected from legitimate supply lines, medical kits listed as delivered to units that no longer existed. Attached were scans of contracts, signatures, authorization codes, and at the center of many of them, either signed or forwarded, was a name I did recognize. Conrad Keller. My brother's name staring back at me in sterile black ink. My chest tightened. My hand hovered over the trackpad. Each click felt heavier than the last. I followed the paper trail through shell corporations and procurement loopholes, backroom deals and whispered authorizations. Shaw's name appeared frequently. So did the names of city officials, judges, a retired colonel now heading a logistics firm. This wasn't small. This wasn't just a few bad actors siphoning off government money. It was a network. And it was organized. There were also photos, surveillance shots taken from high angles and long distances. Conrad meeting with Shaw in a private hangar. Conrad accepting a duffel bag from a man with a blurred face. The timestamps told the story even if the images were blurry. One folder, marked with just the word silencer, showed a redacted report on an ambush gone wrong overseas. Among the dead was a name I never expected to see. Captain Jonathan Keller. My father. The official report had called it a routine mission, an error in navigation, enemy contact. But here, tucked between expense reports and operation memos, was a line item. Target asset removal authorized. Risk of exposure to Phoenix failsafe. Termination necessary. And below it, in an embedded email, my brother's name again, not as the sender, as the recipient. One click and I was staring at a thread that implied something too painful to say aloud. Conrad knew. He had known for years. I sat back and pressed the heels of my hands against my eyes. The room felt too small, the air too thick. I wasn't sure how long I stayed like that, maybe minutes, maybe an hour. Eventually, the light from the window shifted, casting long shadows across the floor, and I forced myself to move. I opened the laptop's camera app. I stared at the screen for a while, my reflection gaunt and pale, blood crusted on my collar, dark circles under my eyes. Then I hit record. "My name is Ryan Keller," I said, my voice steady despite the storm inside. "I was shot 3 days ago by law enforcement in Chicago. The bullet wasn't meant to stop me. It was meant to silence me." I laid out what I knew, not everything, just enough. Enough to prove I wasn't delusional, enough to raise questions, enough to scare the people who needed to be scared. I saved the file and uploaded it to a secure server I'd set up years ago and never expected to use. I sent the link to a journalist my father had spoken about, a woman who had once exposed a military procurement scandal so big it made the front page of 3 national papers. The message was short. If I disappear, publish everything. It was done, or so I thought. The knock at the door was soft, too soft. I approached the peephole carefully, holding my breath. No one was there, but on the floor sat a plain brown envelope. I opened the door slowly, checked the hall, and brought the envelope inside. The contents made my stomach twist into a knot. It was a photograph. My nephew, Conrad's son, walking home from school, smiling, unaware, alone. Underneath the photo was a note, written in thick black ink. "Stay silent, or he disappears." I sat down hard, the photo slipping from my fingers. My lungs wouldn't fill properly. I felt the panic rise, hot and choking. My hands shook as I pressed them into the table, grounding myself, forcing the air back into my body. They knew where I was. They'd been watching me since I left the hospital. They were sending a message, not just to me, but to my conscience. They wanted to break me. They thought fear would do what a bullet failed to. It didn't. It clarified things. I pulled the jacket from the back of the chair, pressed my fingers to the stitching over the heart. The name was faded but still legible, J. Keller. "Dad," I whispered, "I know now." I opened the rest of the files. Everything. names, dates, faces, places. I compiled them, sorted them, cross-referenced them. The hours blurred together. The laptop ran hot beneath my fingers, the screen flashing as files transferred to encrypted partitions. I created copies, sent them to anonymous accounts I'd set up years ago. I scheduled timed releases, triggers in case I stopped logging in, dead man switches. Then I turned to the wall, pinning names to sticky notes, connecting strings, building the web. It stretched across the entire room before I was done. At the center of it all was my brother. He'd stood at our father's grave and called him a hero, knowing he had watched him die on a screen somewhere, knowing he had done nothing to stop it, maybe even helped orchestrate it. I remembered the way his voice cracked during the eulogy. I had thought it was grief. Now I knew it was guilt. The rage sat heavy in my chest, but I didn't let it burn wild. I let it simmer. I focused it. I drafted a message to my father's old friend, Lucas Brown. I hadn't seen him since I was a teenager, but my father trusted him. He had connections. He had reach. I didn't ask for permission. I just sent what I had. His reply came in 3 words. I'm on it. The rest of the night passed without sleep. I couldn't close my eyes. Every sound from the street made my hand twitch toward the drawer where I had stashed a small pistol Eleanor had hidden under the sink. I didn't want to use it, but I would if I had to. Dawn broke, slow and gray. I stood at the window and watched the city wake. The hum of cars, the rattle of trains, life moving on, as if the world hadn't shifted on its axis. I turned from the glass, picked up the jacket, and pulled it on. Then I picked up my phone and sent a single message. Meet me. No more shadows. The trap was ready. All that remained was to set the bait. It rained that morning, not a storm, not a downpour, just that steady, cold kind of drizzle that sinks into your clothes and reminds you of every mistake you've ever made. I pulled the jacket tighter around me as I stepped out into the street, my side aching with every movement. The city hummed around me like it always did, indifferent and impatient. Steam rose from vents, car horns pierced the damp air, and people hurried past with umbrellas and hoods, too busy or too scared to look at anyone for more than a second. That suited me fine. I didn't take the train to the meeting point. I walked. Every block felt like penance, each step carving something out of me, grounding me in pain and memory. I passed kids waiting at bus stops, old men sweeping their stoops, a woman walking her dog in silence. None of them knew. None of them could have guessed that today, a war that had lived in the dark for years was about to break into the daylight, that someone who had once been invisible had decided to stop kneeling. The abandoned depot stood at the edge of the city, rusted fences sagging under their own weight, windows shattered or boarded up, weeds bursting through cracked pavement like the ground itself was trying to escape. It used to be a National Guard station decades ago, back when the world still made sense. Now it was a ghost, forgotten by city maps and developers alike, which made it perfect for what needed to happen. I arrived early, my boots soaked, my breath sharp in my lungs. I slipped inside through a broken side door, the metal groaning against its hinges. Inside, the depot stretched out in silence, massive and echoing, lit only by the weak daylight filtering through the holes in the roof. I walked slowly across the concrete floor, past stacks of broken pallets and rusted filing cabinets, until I reached the center of the space. There, beneath a skylight streaked with grime, I stopped and waited. 10 minutes passed before the sound of tires on gravel reached my ears. I didn't move. Another minute and the door groaned open again. Footsteps echoed. Conrad entered like he owned the air around him. He wore his detective's coat, badge clipped to his belt like a flag he no longer deserved. Behind him stood 2 men I didn't recognize, both built like tanks, both carrying the unmistakable posture of people who'd done things they never talked about. One of them rested a hand casually inside his coat. "You could have just let this die, Ryan," Conrad said as he approached, his voice almost kind. "You could have disappeared. No one would have blamed you." "I'm not disappearing," I replied. "You tried that already." He stopped a few feet from me, eyes scanning the room. He looked up at the skylight, then back at me. I saw it then. The way his jaw clenched, the twitch in his temple. He was nervous. Good. You don't have the leverage you think you do, he said. I have enough. Files? He scoffed. Documents? Redacted reports and photographs? You think that's going to stop this? I've seen those reports. I've seen what they say about you. Unstable, aggressive, paranoid. The court of public opinion's already made up its mind, Ryan. One word from me and they'll never listen to you again. I reached into my pocket, slow and deliberate, and pulled out the small recorder. I pressed play. His voice filled the space, echoing off concrete and rusted metal. Easy money, it said. Who cares about a few dead bodies if the check's clear? Conrad's eyes widened. The men behind him stiffened. One of them pulled out his phone, checked the screen, then looked back at Conrad with uncertainty written all over his face. There's more, I said quietly. Much more, and it's already out there. You think you're some kind of hero? Conrad snapped. You think this changes anything? No, I said. I know it doesn't change the past, but it ends today. A car pulled up outside, its tires screeching against the wet pavement. Another figure stepped into the depot. Eleanor, wearing a long coat, her gray hair pinned back, her eyes sharp and watchful. She was followed by federal agents in plain clothes, their movements crisp and coordinated. No sirens, no shouting, just the calm precision of people who knew exactly what they were walking into. Conrad turned, eyes darting. You called them? He hissed at me. I said nothing. I didn't need to. You told me you'd handle this, he said, turning toward one of the men behind him. You said it was contained. The man didn't respond. He just stepped back slowly, hands up. Eleanor walked to my side, nodded once, then turned to Conrad. This is over, she said. No, he growled. No, it's not. His hand moved to his waistband, the flash of a gun. I didn't think. I lunged. He crashed to the ground, pain exploding in my side as the stitches tore, blood soaking into the jacket again. The gun skittered across the concrete, spinning away. One of the agents shouted. Another moved in, cuffs snapping tight around Conrad's wrists. He didn't fight. He just stared at me, eyes wild, mouth working like he couldn't find the words. Tell me knew, I whispered to him, about Dad, about the operation. You let it happen. I saved us, he spat. You don't understand. He was going to expose everything. He didn't care what it cost. And you did? I asked. What did it cost you, Conrad? Your conscience? He didn't answer. He just turned away as the agents hauled him to his feet. I lay back on the concrete, the rain from the broken roof dripping onto my face. My breath came shallow and fast. Eleanor knelt beside me, pressed a towel to my side. You did it, she said. No, I whispered. We did. The depot filled with motion, agents collecting evidence, photographers snapping pictures, the air humming with radios and footsteps. I watched it all from the ground, my vision blurring, my body screaming. And yet, inside, I felt still, for the first time in years. They took Conrad away in a black SUV. Eleanor helped me to my feet. We walked outside together, the sky still gray but lightening at the edges. The storm had passed, and in its place was something new. At the hospital, they stitched me up again. A different wing this time, a different floor. No guards outside the door, no cameras. Just Eleanor sitting in the corner, watching over me like she had the day they lowered my father into the ground. Conrad's name hit the news within hours. So did Shaw's. So did a dozen others. Photos, files, documents, audio. It was all there. People asked questions. Committees were formed. And for the first time, they had to answer. A week later, I walked through my neighborhood again. People stared. Some nodded, some turned away. I didn't care. I wasn't here for them. I wasn't here for approval or recognition. I was here because this place was mine too, because I had been part of it before I was a name in a headline, because my father had walked these sidewalks, and because I had finally earned the right to walk them without shame. I stopped at the cemetery that afternoon. The grass was damp. The sky was finally clear. I knelt beside my father's grave and laid the jacket over the stone, the name on the patch still visible, still proud. I get it now, I said softly. Why you didn't tell me everything. Why you carried it alone. You were waiting for me to be ready. The wind stirred the grass. I stood, and for the first time, I didn't feel like I was running from something. I was walking toward something better. No more silence. No more kneeling. I had stood up, and I wasn't going back. If this story moved you, make sure to subscribe for more. Don't forget to check out the next chapter and other powerful stories on the channel. And if you believe this message matters, share the video. Someone out there needs to hear it.